The morning Sarah Chen disappeared, nobody noticed. Not the neighbors who hurried past the weathered house on Maple Street, not the mail carrier who stuffed envelopes through the slot, not even the school that marked her absent for the 47th time that year. She was 15 years old and invisible, living in a prison that looked like every other house on the block. Inside that house, hell wore wallpaper. Sarah's stepfather Marcus had rules. She could not look out windows. She could not speak at dinner. She could not make noise when she walked. The basement was her bedroom, a concrete tomb with a mattress on the floor and a bucket in the corner. The door had 3 locks. Sometimes he forgot to bring her food for days. Sometimes she wished he would forget forever. Her mother had disappeared 2 years ago. One morning she was there, making breakfast with shaking hands and hollow eyes. The next morning, gone. Marcus said she had run off with another man, but Sarah knew better. She had heard the sounds that night. The thuds. The silence that followed. She had pressed her ear against the basement door and heard Marcus on the phone, his voice cold and efficient. She never asked questions. Questions got you hurt. The bruises on Sarah's arms told stories she could never speak aloud. Purple galaxies of pain that bloomed and faded in endless cycles. She learned to move like smoke, to breathe without sound, to disappear even when she was standing right in front of him. Survival meant becoming nothing. It meant erasing herself piece by piece until only a ghost remained. But ghosts can haunt. And ghosts can plot. Sarah had been planning her escape for 8 months. Every time Marcus left the house, she explored. She found the spare key hidden in the kitchen drawer. She discovered the basement window that did not quite close properly. She memorized his schedule with the precision of a prisoner counting minutes until freedom. Tuesday nights he went to the bar. He would return at 11, drunk and mean, but between 7 and 11, she had a window. 4 hours to become someone else. 4 hours to live. On this particular Tuesday, Sarah waited until she heard his truck rumble down the street. She counted to 100, then counted again. Silence settled over the house like snow. Her hands trembled as she pushed against the basement window. It resisted, then surrendered with a groan that sounded like breaking bones. Cold air rushed in, carrying the scent of freedom and frost. She squeezed through the opening, her thin frame sliding through the gap like water through fingers. The outside world hit her like a drug. Colors seemed brighter. Sounds were sharper. The February wind bit at her skin, but she welcomed the pain because it was different, because it came from nature instead of fists. She ran. Her feet pounded against sidewalk, then grass, then gravel. She had no plan beyond escape. No money, no phone, no friend to call. She wore only jeans and a thin sweater, inadequate armor against the Montana winter. But she ran anyway, because staying meant dying, and dying had started to seem like mercy. 3 miles from the house, her body began to fail. Her lungs burned. Her legs turned to water. She collapsed behind a gas station, pressing herself against the cold brick wall, trying to become invisible again. That was when she saw him. He was tall, with long silver hair pulled back in a braid, his face weathered like ancient stone. He wore a heavy coat and moved with the quiet confidence of someone who had walked this earth for many seasons. His eyes found hers across the parking lot, and in that moment, Sarah realized something profound. He saw her. Not through her, not past her, but actually saw her. Chief William Blackfeather stopped walking. Their eyes locked. And in that frozen moment between heartbeats, Sarah made a choice. Instead of running, instead of hiding, she stood up. Her voice cracked when she spoke, rough from disuse and terror. "Please," she said. "Help me." The chief did not hesitate. He did not ask questions. He simply nodded and held out his hand. Chief William Blackfeather had learned to read suffering the way other men read newspapers. It was written in posture, in the way eyes refused to meet yours, in the tremor of hands that expected violence. The girl standing before him at the gas station was a textbook of trauma, every page screaming abuse. Her clothes hung on her frame like flags on a windless day. Her skin carried the yellow remnants of fading bruises. But it was her eyes that told the real story. They held the particular emptiness that comes from having hope beaten out of you. "My truck is there," William said quietly, pointing to an old Ford. "You can sit in the back if you want distance. You can ride up front if you want company. But we need to get you somewhere warm." His voice carried no judgment, no pity, only the calm authority of someone who had spent decades helping his people through crises. Sarah's instinct screamed at her to run. Strange man. Strange truck. Every adult in her life had taught her that trust was a trap. But the cold was seeping into her bones, and something in the chief's face reminded her of her grandfather, dead 5 years now, who used to call her his little warrior. She climbed into the passenger seat. The truck's interior smelled like sage and coffee. William started the engine and cranked the heat. He did not drive away immediately. Instead, he pulled a blanket from behind the seat and handed it to her. "I'm taking you to the community center on the reservation," he said. "It's safe. There are people there who help. You don't have to tell me anything. You don't have to do anything except let yourself be helped. Can you do that?" Sarah nodded, incapable of speech. The warmth from the heater felt like absolution. She wrapped the blanket around her shoulders and closed her eyes. When she opened them again, they were pulling into a parking lot. The building was modest, single-story, with lights glowing in every window like promises. William parked and turned to face her fully. "Before we go inside, I need to tell you something. What was done to you was not your fault. I don't know your story yet, but I know that truth. You survived because you're strong. Now you get to discover what strong looks like when it's not busy surviving." Inside the center, a woman named Margaret Three Hawks took one look at Sarah and mobilized like a general preparing for battle. Within minutes, Sarah had hot soup, clean clothes, and a private room. Margaret was a social worker, a grandmother, and a force of nature wrapped in a hand-knitted cardigan. She sat with Sarah as the girl slowly, painfully, began to speak. The words came out fractured and incomplete. Sarah talked about the basement, about Marcus, about her mother's disappearance. She showed them the bruises, the scars, the cigarette burns on her shoulders. Margaret listened without interrupting, her face growing harder with each revelation. "We need to call the police," Margaret said when Sarah finished. "This man needs to be stopped." Sarah's panic was immediate and visceral. She lunged forward, grabbing Margaret's arm. "No. He'll find me. He always said if I told anyone, if I ran, he would find me and make me sorry I was ever born. He knows people. He has connections. Please, you can't." Her voice rose to a near scream, months of suppressed terror finally finding release. William, who had been standing quietly in the doorway, stepped forward. "We will protect you," he said. "But Sarah, you know he's looking for you right now. He knows you're gone. The only way to be truly safe is to make sure he can never hurt you again. That means the law." Sarah knew he was right. Marcus was already hunting for her. She imagined him returning to the house, finding the open window, the rage that would consume him. He would not rest until he found her. Unless they found him first. 3 hours later, Detective Lisa Morales sat across from Sarah, recording her statement. Lisa had worked sex crimes and domestic violence for 12 years, and she had seen things that haunted her dreams. But something about Sarah's case ignited a fury in her that was almost religious in its intensity. The details were horrific. Marcus Chen was not just an abuser. He was a predator who had systematically destroyed this child's life. And the mother, still missing, still unaccounted for. "We're getting a warrant," Lisa said. "Tonight. We're going to that house, and we're going to tear it apart until we find evidence. And Sarah, we're going to find your mother. One way or another, we're going to find out what happened to her." When the police raided the house on Maple Street at 2 a.m, Marcus was passed out on the couch, drunk and defenseless. They found the basement room exactly as Sarah described. They found the locks. The bucket. The mattress stained with blood and tears. But it was what they found buried in the backyard that made even seasoned investigators turn away in horror. Sarah's mother had never left. She had been there all along, 6 feet under the garden where Marcus grew tomatoes every summer. The news reached Sarah at dawn. She did not cry. She had no tears left. Instead, she simply closed her eyes and whispered a goodbye to a woman who had tried to protect her and paid the ultimate price. The weeks after Marcus's arrest blurred together in a haze of interviews, legal proceedings, and therapy sessions. Sarah moved through it all like a sleepwalker, answering questions in a monotone, signing documents she barely read. The state wanted to place her in foster care, but Chief William Blackfeather had other ideas. He had watched this broken girl begin to breathe again in the safety of the community center, and he recognized something in her that others might miss. Sarah was not broken beyond repair. She was a seed that had been buried in darkness, waiting for light. William stood before the tribal council with a proposal that raised eyebrows and sparked heated debate. "I want to offer Sarah a home," he announced. "Not as a foster placement, not as charity, but as a member of our community. We have empty land. We have resources. We have the ability to show this child what family truly means." Elder Mary Whitehorse spoke first, her voice carrying the weight of 80 years. "She is not Lakota. She has no connection to our people. Why should we take this burden upon ourselves? William's response was immediate and passionate. Because that is who we are. The Lakota have always taken in those who needed shelter. We have survived centuries of attempts to destroy us because we know how to protect the vulnerable. This girl needs more than a bed and 3 meals a day. She needs to know that goodness exists, that safety is possible, that communities can choose to care. If we turn away from her now, what does that say about everything we claim to believe? The debate continued for 3 hours. Some council members worried about resources. Others questioned the precedent it would set. But William's conviction never wavered, and slowly, he won them over. The vote was not unanimous, but it was decisive. The Lakota community would build Sarah a home. Not metaphorically, but literally. They would construct a small house on tribal land, a place that would be hers. A place where she could begin to understand that walls could mean safety instead of imprisonment. When William told Sarah about the decision, she stared at him in disbelief. "Why would you do this for me?" she asked. "You don't even know me." William smiled, the lines around his eyes deepening. "I know enough. I know you're a survivor. I know you deserve a chance to become more than your worst experiences. And I know that building you a home is not charity. It's an honor. It's who we are as a people." The construction began on a crisp March morning. Word had spread throughout the reservation and beyond. Volunteers arrived from everywhere, tribal members, local contractors, activists who had followed Sarah's story in the news. Even people from town, people who rarely interacted with the reservation, showed up with hammers and hope. Sarah watched from a distance as the foundation was poured. She could not quite believe it was real. For so long, she had lived in a world where adults were threats, where safety was a cruel joke. Now dozens of people she did not know were spending their weekends building her a future. Margaret Three Hawks worked alongside her, explaining each step. "That's where your bedroom will be. You'll have windows that actually open, windows you can look out of anytime you want. Over there will be a kitchen. You'll learn to cook. Real food, not just survival rations. And see that corner? That's going to be a reading nook. Chief Williams says you need books. Says every home needs stories." As weeks turned into months, Sarah began to emerge from her shell. She started helping with the construction, learning to use tools, to measure lumber, to understand how pieces fit together to create something whole. It was therapeutic in ways her mandated counseling sessions were not. Every nail she hammered felt like she was building more than a house. She was constructing a new identity, one timber at a time. The volunteers became her unexpected family. There was Danny Redhawk, a carpenter who taught her about angles and precision. There was Annie Brave, a grandmother who brought lunch every day and told stories about Lakota history. There was Tom White, a contractor from town who had lost his own daughter to domestic violence and saw in Sarah a chance at redemption. They did not treat her like a victim. They treated her like a person with potential. They asked her opinions about paint colors and floor plans. They celebrated when she successfully installed her first cabinet. They created normalcy out of chaos. But healing is never linear. Some days, Sarah would freeze at the sound of a truck engine, convinced it was Marcus somehow escaped from jail. Some nights, she woke screaming from nightmares where basement walls closed in around her. Margaret was always there, patient and steady, reminding her that trauma does not disappear just because circumstances improve. "You're not broken," Margaret would say. "You're wounded. And wounds heal, but they take time. Give yourself that time." By late June, the house was finished. It was small but beautiful, with large windows that flooded rooms with light, a wraparound porch perfect for watching sunsets, and a garden plot where Sarah could grow flowers instead of hiding bodies. The tribe held a ceremony to bless the home, traditional songs rising into the summer air like prayers made audible. Chief William placed the key in Sarah's hand. "This is yours," he said. "Not on loan. Not temporary. Yours. You get to decide what happens within these walls. You get to create memories that don't hurt. Welcome home, Sarah Chen. Welcome home." Sarah's first night alone in her new house was terrifying and exhilarating in equal measure. She walked from room to room, turning lights on and off, opening and closing doors, testing the reality of it all. The house smelled like fresh paint and possibility. Her bedroom had a real bed, not a mattress on concrete. The bathroom had a tub where she could soak without fear. The kitchen had a refrigerator she could open anytime hunger struck. Freedom had a weight she had not anticipated. For years, every moment of her existence had been controlled by someone else. Now she had choices, and choices were overwhelming. She made dinner that first night, Boxed macaroni and cheese, nothing fancy, but it was hers. She had chosen it. She had cooked it. She ate at a small table by the window, watching the sun set over the rolling reservation landscape, and something inside her chest that had been clenched tight for years began to loosen. This was what peace felt like. She had almost forgotten. Margaret checked on her daily those first weeks, teaching her the mundane skills that most teenagers learn gradually. How to budget money. How to do laundry. How to grocery shop without panic attacks. The state provided a small stipend for Sarah's care, and Chief William had arranged for her to have a part-time job at the community center. Nothing demanding, just filing papers and answering phones, but it gave her purpose and pocket money. School was more complicated. Sarah had missed so much education that returning to regular classes felt impossible. Her reading skills were several grades behind. Math might as well have been hieroglyphics. But the tribal education coordinator, a patient man named Robert Stanstall, worked with her privately 3 times a week. Intelligence is not about what you know, he told her during a particularly frustrating session. It is about your willingness to learn. And Sarah, you are one of the most willing students I have ever taught. Slowly, painfully, she began to catch up. Words that had seemed foreign became familiar. Equations started making sense. More importantly, she began to believe she was capable of learning, that her brain was not permanently damaged by years of trauma. The reservation community embraced her with a fierceness that sometimes overwhelmed her. Invitations to dinners, to ceremonies, to casual gatherings appeared constantly. At first, she declined them all, too anxious to navigate social situations. But Margaret gently pushed. Community is medicine, she said. You have spent too long alone. Let people in. Sarah started small. She attended a youth group at the community center, sitting silently in the back while teenagers her age talked about normal problems, homework stress, relationship drama, college applications. Their concerns seemed trivial compared to survival, but also beautifully, wonderfully ordinary. She envied their normalcy even as she slowly became part of it. One evening, a girl named Lakota Chief sat down next to Sarah and simply started talking. She did not ask about Sarah's past. She did not treat her like a charity case. She just talked about music, about her annoying brother, about her dreams of becoming a veterinarian. And Sarah, tentatively, talked back. It was the first real conversation she had had with someone her own age in years. It felt revolutionary. Leah became her first real friend, a bridge between isolation and connection. As summer turned to fall, Sarah's therapy sessions with Dr. Patricia Hernandez became the anchor of her week. Patricia specialized in trauma, and she did not push Sarah to relive her horrors. Instead, she taught coping mechanisms. Breathing exercises for when panic threatened to overwhelm. Grounding techniques for when flashbacks pulled her into the past. Ways to recognize triggers before they hijacked her nervous system. Trauma lives in the body, Patricia explained. Your mind might understand you are safe now, but your body still remembers danger. We need to teach your body the truth, that you survived, that you are strong, that you are allowed to relax. The work was exhausting. Some sessions left Sarah feeling raw and exposed, every nerve ending screaming. But gradually, imperceptibly, she began to notice changes. She slept through entire nights without nightmares. She could hear a man's voice raised in anger without immediately freezing. She stopped checking the locks on her doors obsessively. The hypervigilance that had kept her alive in hell was slowly, carefully being dismantled. Chief William visited weekly, never intrusive but always present. He brought small gifts, books, art supplies, a journal with a leather cover. Writing can help, he suggested. Not about the bad times, unless you want to. But about now. About what you notice, what you feel, what you hope for. Sarah started writing tentatively at first, just observations. The way morning light hit her kitchen table. The sound of rain on the roof. The taste of Margaret's fry bread. Gradually, the entries grew longer, more introspective. She wrote about fear and courage. About grief for her mother and fury at Marcus. About the strange, terrifying beauty of starting over. The trial date for Marcus approached like a storm on the horizon. Detective Morales kept Sarah informed of every development. Marcus had been charged with murder, kidnapping, child abuse, and a dozen other crimes. His lawyer tried to cut deals, but the prosecution was uninterested. They wanted the maximum sentence. They wanted justice. Sarah would have to testify. The thought filled her with dread so profound it was physical. She would have to see him again, sit in the same room, speak while he watched. Patricia worked with her intensively, preparing her for the emotional onslaught. "You do not owe him your fear," Patricia said firmly. "He took enough from you. Do not give him your power too." On a cold November morning, Sarah walked into the courthouse flanked by Chief William and Margaret. The building felt oppressive, all marble and judgment. But as they entered the courtroom, Sarah saw something unexpected. The benches were filled with people from the reservation. Danny Red Hawk was there. Annie Brave sat in the front row. Leah and her family occupied an entire section. They had come to support her, to bear witness, to remind her she was not alone. When Marcus was led in wearing prison orange and shackles, Sarah's first instinct was to look away. But then she remembered Chief William's words on that night they met, that she was strong. She forced herself to look directly at Marcus. Marcus Chen looked smaller than Sarah remembered, diminished by incarceration and justice. The monster of her memories was just a man now, pathetic and powerless in his orange jumpsuit. As their eyes met across the courtroom, Sarah felt something unexpected. Not fear. Not hatred. Just a cold, clear recognition that he no longer controlled any part of her existence. The shackles on his wrists were real, but the invisible chains he had wrapped around her soul for years had finally broken. She was free in ways that had nothing to do with geography and everything to do with reclaiming herself. The prosecution built their case methodically over 3 days. They presented evidence from the house. They showed photographs of the basement prison. They brought in experts who testified about long-term abuse and its effects. They presented DNA evidence linking Marcus to her mother's murder. Detective Morales took the stand and described the crime scene in clinical detail that made jurors visibly uncomfortable. But the most powerful testimony was Sarah's. When her name was called, she stood and walked to the witness stand on legs that only trembled slightly. Margaret gave her an encouraging nod. Chief William placed his hand over his heart, a gesture of support that steadied her. The prosecutor, a severe woman named Jennifer Torres, guided Sarah through her story with gentle precision. Sarah spoke clearly, her voice gaining strength with each sentence. She described years of abuse. She explained the rules, the punishments, the systematic destruction of her identity. She talked about her mother's disappearance and the fear that had kept her silent. When the defense attorney tried to cross-examine her, implying she was lying or exaggerating, Sarah did not crumble. "I have scars," she said quietly. "I have medical records. I have years of school absences. I have a mother who is dead and buried in a backyard. I have no reason to lie. I have every reason to make sure he never hurts anyone else." The jury deliberated for less than 4 hours. Guilty on all counts. When the verdict was read, Marcus showed no emotion. But Sarah felt something massive shift inside her chest. Justice was real. Accountability was possible. Monsters could be caged. At sentencing 2 weeks later, Judge Patricia Moreno addressed Marcus directly. "You took a child and attempted to break her. You murdered her mother and buried her like garbage. You are a predator of the worst kind. This court sentences you to life in prison without the possibility of parole. May you spend every day of that life understanding that you failed." Sarah Chen survived. She is thriving. You destroyed nothing but yourself. As Marcus was led away, he turned to look at Sarah one final time. She met his gaze without flinching, and then she did something he would never forget. She smiled. Not a smile of cruelty, but of triumph. A smile that said she had won, that she was more than what he had tried to make her. Then she turned away, and he ceased to exist for her. The celebration at the community center that evening was loud and joyful. The tribal council had declared it a day of recognition, honoring Sarah's courage and the community's commitment to protecting the vulnerable. Tables overflowed with food. Music filled the air. People danced and laughed, and Sarah sat at the center of it all, overwhelmed by belonging. Chief William pulled her aside during the festivities. "I have something to show you," he said mysteriously. He led her outside to where a small group had gathered near her house. As they approached, Sarah saw that someone had carved a wooden sign for her porch. It read Chen House in beautiful script, with intricate designs around the edges, traditional Lakota patterns intertwined with Chinese motifs, a perfect fusion of her heritage and her adopted home. "You are part of both worlds now," William explained. "And both worlds are better because you are in them." Tears streamed down Sarah's face, but they were clean tears, pure grief and pure joy mixed together. She had spent so long believing she was worthless. Now she had a house with her name on it, a community that claimed her, a future that extended beyond survival. Winter settled over the reservation, and Sarah settled into her life. She continued school, her grades improving steadily. She deepened her friendships, learning to trust and be trusted. She began volunteering at a shelter for abused women, turning her trauma into purpose. She discovered she had a gift for listening, for making others feel heard. Margaret joked that Sarah would make an excellent social worker someday. Sarah did not dismiss the idea. She was beginning to imagine futures that once seemed impossible. She thought about college, about career, about all the ordinary dreams she had been denied. They felt within reach now. One evening in late December, as the first snow of the season fell softly outside her windows, Sarah sat in her reading nook with a cup of tea in her journal. She wrote about the journey from that gas station parking lot to this moment. She wrote about the people who had refused to look away from her suffering. She wrote about Chief William, who had seen her and chosen to help without hesitation. She wrote about the Lakota community that had built her more than a house, they had built her a foundation for becoming human again. She wrote about her mother, whose love had tried to shield her even when it cost everything. She made a promise to that memory, she would live fully enough for both of them. The house around her was quiet but not silent. It had the comfortable sounds of home, the hum of the heater, the tick of a clock, the whisper of wind against windows she could open anytime she wanted. Outside, the reservation stretched under starlight, vast and ancient and welcoming. Sarah thought about the Lakota concept of Mitikuya or Yasin, all my relations. It meant that everything was connected, that we belonged to each other and to the earth itself. She was beginning to understand that truth. She was no longer alone and isolated. She was part of something larger, a web of relationships and reciprocity and care. As she prepared for bed that night, Sarah paused by her bedroom window. The snow had stopped, and the moon illuminated the landscape in silver light. She could see the glow of houses scattered across the reservation, each one a story of survival and resilience. Her house now stood among them, a testament to what communities can do when they choose compassion over indifference. She thought about the girl she had been, trapped in that basement, believing that darkness was forever. She wished she could go back and whisper to that terrified child the truth she now knew. You will survive this. You will escape. You will find people who see your worth. You will have a home that does not hurt. You will be okay. You will be more than okay. You will be loved. Sarah turned off the light and climbed into bed. For the first time in her life, she fell asleep without fear, wrapped in blankets that smelled like lavender, in a house built by hands that had never harmed her, on land that had welcomed her home. The darkness held no monsters anymore. It was just night, peaceful and temporary, waiting for dawn. And Sarah knew, with the certainty of someone who had walked through fire and emerged standing, that morning would come. It always did. She had survived to see it.